For today's story, we cover part 2 of the Canadian protests and we learn why freedom is a 4-letter word. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this legal education content, and today will be the day I earn your subscription. But first, a huge shout out to this video's supporter, Aura. 2021 has seen 1 billion records get hacked from major social media sites, cryptocurrency exchanges, and other sources. If you're a user of any of these companies, there's a chance that your personal information has been compromised. So how can you protect yourself? Well, go to aura.com/uncivillaw. When you use my link below, aura.com/uncivillaw, you'll get up to 40% off on all plans. aura.com/uncivillaw to help protect you against the growing threats of credit card fraud and identity theft protection in this increasing digital age. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this legal education content, and today will be the day I earn your subscription. Yesterday, we covered The Verge and their wonderful article. Today, we're covering the CBC, who wants me to know that freedom is bad. Okay, CBC, let's learn a little bit about why freedom is bad and why it's especially bad for those horrible, horrible convoy people. Okay, let's get started with this. CBC, why the word freedom is such a useful rallying cry for protesters. I mean, the True North, strong and free. Hello? Anyone? Okay, fine. The word has become common among far-right groups. Canadian national anthem is now far-right. Okay. As demonstrators against COVID-19 restrictions continue across COVID, the word freedom is on the lips and placards of many protesters. Often associated with protests and rallies in the United States, the term has taken hold among protesters who are part of the Freedom Convoy, which rolled into Ottawa late January and has become entrenched in the city downtown. For many, freedom is a malleable term, one that's open to interpretation. I suppose that's true. It is somewhat open to interpretation, but as a generalized principle, freedom is my ability to do things without restriction or with less restriction. It's my ability to make choices for myself is kind of the short definition of freedom. So, I mean, yeah, okay. The flexibility in part has fueled its growth among certain groups, says Barbara Perry, director of the Center on Hate, Bias and Extremism at Oshawa-based Ontario Tech University. Talking about freedom, quote, "It is a term that has resonated. You can define it and understand it and sort of manipulate in a way that makes sense to you and is useful to you depending on your perspective." The Center for Hate, Bias, and Extremism is now apparently monitoring the word freedom. It's also a term that has thrived among far-right groups, says Perry, one of a number of experts who say the presence of far-right groups in Canada has grown. As seen among some protesters currently opposing vaccine mandates and other public health measures, freedom signals a desire for freedom from government intervention or overreach. Yeah, that's kind of a short definition of freedom, yeah. Quote, "I think it resonates very much with what we've been seeing and maybe take some inspiration from what we've been seeing in the U.S. over the last year and a half or so, leading up to the last election and the events of January 6th, referring to the insurrection on the Capitol." Oh my word, freedom is an insurrection word. Protesters have gridlocked the streets of Ottawa with tractor trailers and personal vehicles for 16 days as part of what they call the Freedom Convoy. Similar to protests have sprung up across Canada in the wake of the ongoing demonstration in the nation's capital, including an international border crossing in Ontario, including at international border crossings. Convoy protesters are calling for an end to all vaccine mandates as well as other pandemic-related restrictions. Given what I know about Canada and their pandemic restrictions, some of which seem to violate your very own charter, incidentally, I'm not at all surprised. Canada Unity, one of the main organizing groups behind the protester, says on its website it's committed to upholding freedom of choice for Canadians. How dare they? Evan Balgord, executive director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, says the way many protesters frame their call for freedom renders the word meaningless. Really? And what they're really asking for is a shift in governmental policy that could potentially have a negative impact on others. Yes, that is a possible outcome of freedom. Correct. If the government doesn't impede my life, it won't impede your life. And it won't act as much. That might, in some senses, be negative. Freedom, like everything else, has trade-offs. I'm willing to accept this premise. There are certain advantages to not freedom. I suppose that's, yeah, and it could potentially have negative impacts, but it doesn't render the word meaningless. It just means that they want to be free. Okay. Quote, when they're yelling they care so much about their freedom, they're taking freedoms away from other people who don't have the same kind of agency and choice they do. How? How are they taking away their choice and agency? What agency and choices did they have that they no longer have? What agency and choices have they been robbed of? What agency and choices will they be robbed of if successful? Oh, okay. Concept of freedom can be used to reject equality. Yes, it can. Because freedom and equality, or equity at least, are in a bit of conflict, right? If you want everyone's outcome to be the same, people can't be free. If people are free, they'll make different choices, and their outcomes will be different. So it can be used to reject equality in so much as if people are free, they might make choices. And those choices might be good, it might be bad. And then the end result is that things may not be equal because some people made good choices and some people made bad. So yeah, I guess, but then the only way to ensure that everyone's equal is to prohibit all choice and drive everyone to the lowest common denominator. To see the word freedom bandied about as part of the protest points to a broader circulation of what Elizabeth Anker calls violent forms of freedom. Freedom is a slippery concept, says Anker, an associate professor of political science at George Washington University, which again, I'd like to just note is in America, so apparently this quote is okay, and author of Ugly Freedoms, which examines the history of how freedom as a concept has been used in American society. Quote, on the far right, individual freedom is often translated into someone who refuses to be bound by norms of equality, treating all people equally, or norms to remedy inequality, whether it's trying to remedy racial discrimination or gender discrimination. Yes, that would be true. Freedom means that you might not bound yourself to norms because you're making choices, correct? So you might not make the normal choice. True. In terms of anything, true. Now, treating people equally, I have no problem with because that's fine. But to remedy inequality, right? To remedy inequality, you necessarily have to take away people's freedom. So, yeah, the far right has some issues with the remedy of inequality because you want to take away people's freedom in order to generate that lack of inequality. The word has been used by far-right groups as part of a pushback effort to remedy inequality, she added. And why those forms are violent freedom. I'm not even sure how they're violent, incidentally. Because normally when you say violence, you're talking about, violence. Saying we don't want to remedy inequality is a political position. It's not violence. And while those forms of violent freedom can result in situations that are dangerous, discriminatory, or anti-democratic, freedom can result in those things, the call to action to gain broader support became fighting for freedom is seen as a noble cause. True north, strong and free, man. True north, strong and free. Far-right groups appearing in Canada as far back as 2015, and in the years since, Perry says the anti-state rhetoric has gained more mainstream popularity. Now Freedom leads social media posts about the protests. Right. Is trumpeted in memes and even the focus of merchandise. People want merchandise reflecting freedom. Okay. A bumper sticker that reads "Mandates Freedom" emblazoned with a maple leaf is available for sale online, so people might be able to express themselves. So are t-shirts and hat promoting the Freedom Convoy, because people might want to express support for those things. Pushing individual freedom over the social good. These things can, although not necessarily are, in conflict. Just like freedom and security can be, but are not necessarily in conflict. This is maybe a point of slight distinction with me, for example, with Ben Franklin, right? Because he implies through the phrase, those who want a little temporary security, give up freedom, deserve neither liberty nor safety. Which to my mind, implies that freedom and security are necessarily a trade-off, which isn't necessarily true. You can have more security without necessarily impeding on freedom. And you can have social good without necessarily impeding on freedom. They're not necessarily in tension for one. Anchor says the concept of freedom as displayed in the anti-mandate protests is something more often attributed to the United States, which is odd because, you guys have the freedom right in your national anthem. Freedom is also used as almost a national entitlement, as a claim for what people have. Right. Correct. People want freedom from, yeah. While some in the U.S. may see mask mandates as a violation of individual rights, it is, because you're mandating individuals to do those things. For example, citizens in many other countries wouldn't consider such rules to be an intrusion. I can't intelligently speak to what in other countries speak of, but other countries may not have the same concepts when it comes to freedom, or same concepts when it comes to a lot of things for that matter. Social conventions can change from place to place. In those places and in Canada, there's generally a consensus that wearing masks is for the benefit of society's most vulnerable. Okay, debatable, because whether or not masks are effective is particularly questionable, particularly depending on what kind of masks we're talking about. And even in really good masks, because they only filter out if people use them perfectly and people don't. So the benefit of masks, and no one, at least to my knowledge, is trying to prevent the most vulnerable from wearing masks if they want. But even in Canada, some protesters have balked at the idea, claiming the need for freedom. Quote, "It's been taking a lot of people by surprise to see people in Canada, who often seem so much more accepting of social interdependence, start pushing against it with language of individual freedom." Well, maybe you finally pushed the Canadians too far. And they're not willing to say yes anymore. You push them too far, and finally maybe they're standing up. And now this is bad, because they want freedom. Freedom from mandates. Freedom to travel again. Freedom to go outside their homes. To travel within provinces. To travel outside of provinces. And so forth and so on. But, the freedom is really, really scary because it's a word used by the alt-right, because it will prevent society from fixing inequality by, and remedying things. And yeah, so, okay. Thus, that ends part 2 of our coverage of the Freedom Convoy, in which we learned that freedom, in the term Freedom Convoy, is bad. I'm surprised they didn't write an article saying the term convoy in the term Freedom Convoy is bad. How the term convoy is racist. There's an exercise left to the reader. There you go. I want you in the comments of this video to write a comment, and I want you, within the space of that comment, to make an argument. The word convoy is racist. This will be a fun exercise for everyone on the YouTube. We'll all participate in the comments of this video together. Write a comment about why the term convoy is racist. They've already shown why freedom is a far-right thing. Let's show them why convoy is racist since they didn't write the article. We'll write the article for them. That will be fun. But until then, my friends, I hope all is well. Cheers and goodbye. Thank you so much for being part of the Uncivil Law family. If you enjoyed this legal education content, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. We appreciate your continuing support. And until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.